Well, yeah, it's 23 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies.
I know. But that reminds me, you had the Oldies But Goodies Club on Sunset Strip that now is the Comedy Store. And I remember I wrote a little thing for some paper because I spent New Year's Eve there, '73, and I said, I remember thinking that I'm here welcoming in '73 with a bunch of people who don't acknowledge '63, because there was like, at that point when there was the Oldies station, there was like a solid rule that you didn't go to the Beatle era, wasn't there? It seems to me that at some point there was like, you don't go that far.
I remember that, yeah, when K-Earth first went on the air, it was that way.
Yeah.
The first couple of years.
See, I did a show at my, you want me to tell the K-Earth story?
Yeah.
All right, it is an interesting story, and I bet you don't know this either, but you'll know what I'm talking about, Barry. When KHJ first decided to change their format and go into some other format, that would be like 72 or 73, somewhere in there. They decided that they wanted to go after the station that Barry was talking about, KPPC, because they were the #1 station.
KPPC, which was underground.
Underground rock.
Freeform.
Yeah, they called it.
Mostly rock, but they could play anything.
Yeah, those were great days.
They'd segue from Led Zeppelin into Robert Johnson.
They called it underground radio.
Yes.
So when KHJ changed their call letters, they decided they were going to try to go after the #1 station, so they called themselves K-Earth, underground, see?
And then Earth, like hip.
Well,
hippie
but primarily it was because, underground in the Earth. Yeah. So then what happened was that time they had a new manager out here. They brought in their top manager of the year, RKO, and I got him to come to the place you were, Art Laboe's club, and see all the people in there. It was just packed with people from 25 to 55, and he liked it, and so I liked the idea of getting my show on K-Earth, which was going to be underground, and so I said, well, why don't you look at these demographics, a lot better than going after the other guy's ballpark, who's already well entrenched. So that's how K-Earth became an oldies station.
Yeah, because that's not an oldies name. I wondered about it when it first came out.
That's the history of it. And the first oldies show on K-Earth came from Art Laboe's club on Fridays and Saturday nights.
Right, yeah, I remember the broadcast upstairs.
Well, thank you. That left the door open for KMET, which essentially co-opted what KPPC had done.
Right,
and then over a long period of years, it segued into AOR radio, which was a much more formularized thing. But I saw that evolve over a course of years. When I came to KMET, 1972, they were playing everything. It was free form. Then one day I went in there and all the classical records were gone. Then a few months later I went in there, all the jazz records were gone. Then it was the blues records. And then it was all the soft rock stuff like the Joni Mitchell, leaving only the straight ahead rock and roll. So I watched the birth through attrition of the AOR format.
By the way, most people don't read radio and
album-oriented rock.
And that means album-oriented rock means Led Zeppelin and Neil Young.
That's what it meant, certainly in the late 70s, was Led Zeppelin and Neil Young.
I mean, radio was very interesting during this underground period. You don't know that because there's none of it around anymore, but I mean, I wish a station would start that would play everything, because I used to really enjoy Jimmy Rabbit on KMET in the mid '70s when he'd play, a current record, then follow it with Waylon Jennings and follow it with Gene Vincent.
His background was country,
and it was terrific. Well, that was that was part of the hippie country era, anyways.
Yes.
So you just moved. You didn't just move, but you moved not long ago from a home where the records actually threatened to sink the place?
Yes, I think this picture might have been taken in my old place. But records were just piled everywhere. I hadn't been able to get at the Ray Charles LPs for 6 months, simply because there was so much stuff piled in front of them. So I moved. That was in 1979, and then we had to move again about 3 years ago because the floor caved in under my main record room.
Was it the 78s?
No, that particular room I like to say was the heavy metal room. Actually, it had some 78s in it, but it was mostly the LP.
But the floor actually collapsed?
It did, yes.
Was it just that? Was it like the last straw? Did you actually put that one record in?
It must have been that. Well, I think it must have been something like that, or maybe the cat.
Well, weren't you there? You mean it happened independently?
It had started collapsing. We were out. We were out visiting friends. We came home, went to bed. I didn't go in the record room, and then about 3 o'clock
Excuse
in
me,
the
when I
morning.
was at that
Yeah,
house, and there was no
right.
record room. As far I remember, the whole house was a record room.
Well, the one room that was absolutely
kitchen-
solid records, wall to wall.
That was the kitchen had records in it, didn't it?
Yes, the kitchen did have records in it. Yes, I mean, I was a bachelor when I moved into that house. What did I need with 40
A
shelves
second,
full
a
of
second
dishes,
plate.
so-
Yeah, right.
yes.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, this just tremendous crash. Yes, we at first we thought there was a burglar in the house and he was trying to remove the big TV, and it bumped into the wall or something. But no, the TV was still there. So we went back to bed. But then about half an hour later, it happened again. This time I realized where it had come from. I walked into the record room and the records were still there, but suddenly I realized I was walking downhill. So we lost very few records. That was the good part of it, but we had to get all our friends that we could reach at 5 a.m. and glad I couldn't find your number at that time.
Right. I was
But
gonna
anyway, so we kind of ran a brigade carrying the records out to the garage.
Some of the records that saved the crunch, you have a few of them with you.
Yes,
Things
right.
this is things you can't do on the radio show.
Like, this is a record made by a keyboard player who is totally deaf, but
Wow.
he still managed to make a record. Songs to Hear.
Actually, put
it's
them on.
called.
Let me. Okay, you take another one. I think like
Yes,
this
okay.
and leaning down a little bit, so it doesn't. get any
Okay,
glare.
leaning down, okay. I have a couple demonstrations of a small theme. This is parodies of album covers. I mean, I play parodies of songs on the show all the time, like Weird Al Yankovic's parodies of Michael Jackson, and of course he did a cover, his Even Worse album, which is a parody of Michael Jackson's Bad. I didn't bring that. I brought an earlier example by Frank Zappa. First of all, you've all seen this well-known Beatles album, Sgt. Pepper, and there's what the inside looks like. You see that there? Okay. So Frank Zappa decided to do a parody of that cover, and this is the way it was originally supposed to look. He was supposed to display it in the stores kind of like this, and there's the back cover, and then you open it up, and it would be like this. And I guess Capitol Records got wind of it, and they went, what? You're going to do that? So anyway, they went around and around. The lawyers, wherever Frank goes, there's always attorneys. But anyway, they wound up with this as the outside cover.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Because I remember it the other way around.
And you
Yeah.
open it up, and it's like this. Here is a more subtle example. People who've been around maybe as long as I have may remember this album by my fellow Minnesotan, Mr. Bob Dylan. It was one of his most famous albums with Subterranean Homesick Blues and Mr. Tambourine Man. Well, at that time, Duane Eddy, the great guitarist who has a new anthology out on Rhino, was kind of in one of the troughs of his career. So he was reduced to doing whole albums covering other people. So they did an album called Duane Does Dylan, and so the cover of that one is kind of a subtle parody of the one that Dylan had done. Notice the difference between the models and the whole image put out by the two models that they used. And also, whereas Dylan has a very eclectic selection of books and records lying around, which I'm sure he gave a fair amount of thought to. They may do here with a bunch of Wisdom magazines. I don't know if anybody remembers Wisdom. It was a hardcover magazine for people who wanted to kind of let people think that they were intellectuals, whether they were or not. But a stack of those may do for this album. My final display is what's fortunately a rather small part of my category. You were talking about how you play killer oldies on your show. We have a small category here, records made by murderers. This
The original
one,
Manson
of course,
album.
the original Charles Manson album of his demos, including some recorded at the behest of the late Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. This is perhaps a lesser known item. This is an album by the People's Temple Choir, Jim Jones's group.
Oh.
So you look at all those people, and most of them are, I'm afraid, no longer with us. But you can hear their beautiful singing inside this album and see the Reverend Mr. Jones's picture on the back. So this is, fortunately, a very small part of the Demento archives. I'm glad there aren't more like that.
I think so. As long as we're holding up, thank you, Barry. As long as we're holding up things that we're involved with lately, and of course you're involved with the record collection for life. What have you got here, Art?
Oh, some of the things that we do on our company. Well, we have a game here called the Oldies but Goodies music game.
Tilt it down.
Tilt it down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not too far, but
that should do it.
yeah.
You got it?
And it's an oldies but goodies game which involves a tape and a.
Well, it involves actually 3,500 questions about old rock and roll. It's a board game, actually.
What's the hardest one?
Well, I don't know. Where was Little Richard born? Something maybe. That's. You know what? People look at this game and some people call us or write in and say the game is too difficult, and just as many write in and say it's too easy. So I don't know what to say about it. But it's an interesting game. It took us a year to put together. We researched every question. You know, it seems like it'd be easy, but when you start getting into it. And what we're doing now is not so much the real old oldies, a la Fats Domino and Chuck Berry and all that, but more stuff like this one, which is called Best Love Songs, with Teddy Pendergrass and Stevie Wonder and those kinds of artists.
Not unlike what's available on TV. It's your own unique assembling of songs.
Well, that's true, yeah.
It's got a couple of lovers on the cover. Actually, this is like a VJ album. It doesn't show any artists.
yes,
it just shows. Remember those D. Clark albums? That
Right.
are those the same
Well,
two
if
people
you
from
have,
D. Clark?
if you have 50 artists in there, it's kind of hard to get them all on one cover unless we do a.
Frank Zappa.
No, we do a. We do that. We could do that. But I mean, it'd be hard to assemble all those guys.
And this is
you
a
know.
British rock box.
Yeah,
you
this
put
is your
together.
era, Art. You love this stuff.
Yeah.
With the Zombies and the Kinks and the Moody Blues. And
It's okay, but
The
it's
Animals.
It's a little late for me, actually.
is it? Oh, okay.
But, that's very interesting. So
Yeah, that's right. You like rockabilly.
you're darn right.
No, I got a Jerry Lee Lewis for you.
Okay. So are you signing any bands these days? A couple years ago, you had a couple new rap kind of things.
We have a Latin group called Alma, and they've had a medium hit recently. They redid Make It With You and one of the Bretton Woods songs called Take a Chance on Me. It was a regional hit out here.
Doesn't Brenton Wood, who had 2 medium-sized hits, isn't he like a giant because of oldies?
Yeah, well, he's very big out here, you know, especially with the Latinos. And he by the way, they were top 10. Give me a little sign and Oogum Boogum.
Okay, big song. Sorry, I don't mean to diminish him, but you hear names from the past.
Yeah, he's real popular.
I mean,
out here.
Clyde McPhatter has a stamp. He had 2 songs, didn't he?
Well,
I mean, really, I mean,
Drifters and all.
but I mean, as far as the average person knows, it's he had Lover Please and one other one, Lover's Question. So I don't think Brenton Wood, though he's great, is remembered as vividly as some other two
Out here,
hit
he's
guys.
quite popular.
We have like 1 minute left. I don't know if you have any closing things that you've left out that you wanted to say.
Oh, in case you've heard this on my radio show and wondered what it was, this is a musical instrument called a flexotone, and it makes nice kind of Halloween spooky effects. I've heard these on records going back as far as the 1920s, so in case you hear that on my show and wonder what it was, now you've seen it.
Okay.
Show and tell time on the Dr. Demento Art
Appearance.
Farm. Yes.
What else you got? You have other things. I mean, you're like you're.
There goes the SP.
I mean, you're like Spike Jones is not alive anymore, but he kind of lives through you, I think.
I think so. Watch for a new Spike Jones double CD set next year. I can't tell you too much about it, but
through Rhino, you and I mean, we can say that, can't
yes,
we?
right.
We hope it'll come out.
Yeah.
I met Spike Jones a couple of times.
Is that right?
Yeah, and in person, he was the straightest guy you ever want to meet. I mean, he never did any jokes or anything. You know, he was just like completely straight.
People said that about me too.
Well, we know you're not straight.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right. It's been wonderful having these 2 guys on. Art Laboe, I've been wanting to have you on for years, and we'll do it again sometime.
Glad I made it.
And Dr. Demento, Barry Hansen, any parting stuff? I know the theme music's going, so whether we're on, we are still on, so we'll talk over the
They're
parting
showing.
music.
Okay.
All right, so we've been looking for you to pop up on radio stations around LA because the KLSX thing was terminated not long ago.
Well, by the time you see this show, you will undoubtedly know more than I know today. But anyway, discussions continue, and the Demento show thrives in many stations all over the rest of the country.
Okay, you could, and then let me get to Art Laboe. Tell me about, in the next 10 seconds, tell me about Oldies Radio in LA. KRLA has a much better playlist than the other 2 guys who play, Heard It Through the Grapevine and certain million Motown songs over and over again.
Well, in the present, there's some changes going on there at KRLA.